Chapter 14. The bus lurched and bumped across town. Since Jenny and a man in overalls stretched out sound asleep on the long back seat, were the only passengers on this blustery Saturday evening, the bus driver was setting a cross-town record. He wasn't stopping at bus stops or even for traffic lights. The town seemed really empty, as if the cold and the gloom had forced everyone into hibernation, even though the winter was just beginning. Staring out of the smeared bus window at the silent streets and empty sidewalks, Jenny felt as dark and gloomy as the passing scenery. Her stop came much too quickly. For a brief moment she was tempted to stay on the bus, to keep riding round and round from one side of town to the other until the night was over. Only the thought of seeing Donnie cheered her, made her forget her trepidation at going back to the Hagens' house, where so much fear awaited. She stepped down off the bus, ducking her head to protect her eyes from the wind, which seemed to gust in all directions at once. The bare trees tossed and rattled their branches as she zipped up her down jacket as far as it would go and began to hurry toward the Hagens' house. Friday's rainfall had frozen, leaving icy patches scattered over the lawns and sidewalk. Jenny slipped and almost toppled over backwards, but her speed propelled her forward, and she regained her balance without slowing down. She had gone nearly a block when she began to suspect she was being followed. Walking even faster, she tried to listen over the roar of the wind. Was it just the clatter of tree branches overhead? Was she imagining it? No. She heard ice cracking beneath someone's boots, footsteps moving quickly over the frozen walk, heavy breathing. She turned her head quickly, saw moving shadows sliding closer, closer. It was Willers, the creepy neighbor. She began to run, slipping again, sucking in the frozen wet air, running past dark, shifting woods now. No houses in sight. The entire world lit by a lone street lamp, casting more shadow than light, shadows that swirled and teased and tried to bewilder her as she fled. Run, Jenny, run! She wasn't fast enough. She couldn't outrun him. She had to outrun him. Wait up, he called, but she just kept running. A few seconds later, she was leaping onto the Hagens' front stoop, grateful for the yellow porch light, so bright, so warming, so safe. She looked back to see if Willers was behind her, but he had disappeared into the darkness. Where had he gone? Why was he chasing her? Was he trying to terrorize her? She realized she was shivering from the cold. She raised her hand to knock, and the door swung open. Jenny, I thought I heard someone out here, Mr. Hagens said. She dashed into the narrow front hallway, so grateful to be inside. Jenny, what's wrong? He asked. You look terrible. I'm sorry. Someone followed me from the bus stop. What? What are you talking about? Who? He helped her pull off her down jacket. Mr. Willers, your neighbor. Willers? I don't know anyone named Willers. He said he was your next-door neighbor. Mr. Hagen held the jacket in front of him and stared at her, looking really troubled. Neighbor? What neighbor? Jenny, we have no neighbors. That house next door has been vacant for 6 months. Chapter 15. Can we play hide-and-seek? Not now, Donnie, Jenny said, giving his slender shoulders a gentle squeeze. This man said he was a neighbor? Said his name was Willers? Mr. Hagen asked, his face aflame. He stood blocking the entrance to the living room, Jenny's jacket in his hand. I'm pretty sure I heard correctly, Jenny said. Maybe we shouldn't go out tonight, Mr. Hagen called upstairs to his wife. She appeared at the top of the stairs, snapping on her earrings, a surprised look on her face. What? Mike, you know the Spauldings are counting on us. Elaine will never speak to me again if we don't show up. But what about the attacks on those babysitters? Mr. Hagen called, his face consumed with worry. Donnie could be in danger. Maybe this Willers. Mike, we have to go, Mrs. Hagen called down. I'm sure if Jenny keeps the doors locked and all the lights on. Okay, he replied impatiently. We won't stay out too late, he told Jenny. If you hear anything at all, the tiniest squeak or creak, call the police. They can be here in less than 5 minutes. Okay, Jenny said. She had every intention of calling the police at the first suspicious sign. She reached into her jeans pocket and felt the piece of paper on which she had written Lieutenant Ferris's special number. What about hide-and-seek? Donnie whined, pulling Jenny toward the living room. You promised. I did not, Jenny said, laughing. I did not promise. No hide-and-seek tonight, Mr. Hagen said sternly. Do something quieter. Why don't you watch that tape you made me rent for you? Yeah, Donnie cried enthusiastically. tugging Jenny harder. "Come on, let's watch it." "What is it?" Jenny asked, relieved that she wouldn't have to go running all over the house tonight playing hide-and-seek. "What did you rent?" "Poltergeist," Donnie said. "Have you seen it? It's really cool. She gets sucked into the TV set and she can't get out." "Oh, great," Jenny said, rolling her eyes. "Just what I needed tonight," she thought. Donnie settled down on the floor in front of the TV, and Jenny started a movie for him. The Hagans left, after 3 more warnings by Mr. Hagan to call the police if she heard anything at all. He looked so overcome with worry, she was a little sorry she had told him about Willers. Poor Mr. Hagan, Jenny told herself, as the movie rolled across the TV screen. I'm the one who should be scared, but he looks positively terrified. The movie seems to be a series of loud, disconnected scenes. She couldn't concentrate on it at all. Donnie kept insisting that he'd rather play hide-and-seek, but she kept refusing. Luckily, he was falling asleep before the movie was half over. She got him up to bed before 9:30. Now what, she asked herself, returning to the white leather chair in the den. I've got to do something to get my mind off Willers, and Chuck, and the calls, and the folded-up note, and Chuck. Was it just 2 nights ago that they had sat on this chair together? So together? She stared at the black telephone across the den on the desk. Was it going to ring tonight? Was her whispering caller going to renew his threats, or did he plan to carry them out tonight? She shuddered. Then she heard the footsteps. Someone was running fast in the back hallway. Donnie? No, the footsteps were too heavy, too fast. Who was in the house? She jumped up, reached in her pocket for the phone number. Would she have time to call? No. The footsteps were closer. Someone was running across the living room. Mr. Hagan! Hi, Jenny. He limped toward her at full speed, his face red, filled with worry. Everything okay? Yes, you startled me. I didn't know who. I hurried back. I just had a hunch that something was wrong. He was breathing heavily, wheezing between his words. His shirt had come untucked from his trousers. He looked positively crazed with fear. Donnie's fine. He went to bed early, Jenny squeaked out the words. She was still trying to calm down after the fright he had given her. He's okay? You're sure? He isn't sick or anything? No, he's fine. Really? I just had a hunch. A bad feeling that something was terribly wrong. She watched him clamber up the stairs until he disappeared on the landing. Then she slumped down on the bottom step, rested her head in her hands, trying to collect herself. How many more times was Mr. Hagan going to frighten her like that? Would he ever trust her? Would he ever learn to relax? He had been so overcome with fear for Donnie, he hadn't even apologized for scaring her to death. And what did he expect to find? What was he so afraid of? Jenny pulled herself to her feet and leaned all her weight against the banister, waiting for Mr. Hagan to return from Donnie's room. She yawned. Fear always seemed to make her feel tired. Jenny! Jenny! Mr. Hagan's cries shattered her thoughts, startled her awake. Yes? He glared down at her from the top of the stairs. His normally small eyes were wide with terror. His face was twisted in shock. Donnie's gone, he screamed. Gone. Chapter 16. Where is he? Where is he? Mr. Hagan was screaming from the top of the stairs. His words had no meaning for Jenny. Her mind had gone blank. She could hear his shouts, hear the sounds he was making, but the sounds had no meaning, as if the words were too horrifying to comprehend. This can't be happening to me, she told herself. Donnie, where are you? Mr. Hagan shouted at the top of his lungs. Where is he? Where is he? Jenny saw flashes of light, like flash cubes being popped right in front of her face. She blinked, trying to get away from the flashes, trying to see clearly. Donnie! Donnie! Where are you? Mr. Hagan's voice was calling. More flashing lights. Jenny struggled to clear her head, to force herself back to reality, to force the words to make sense again, to make all of this go away. Without realizing it, she had climbed the stairs. She was running into Donnie's room. If only the white flashes would stop. If only she would wake up to find this was just a nightmare. If only Mr. Hagan would stop shouting. Maybe she could clear her head, figure it out, take responsibility. This can't be happening, Mr. Hagan screamed at her. Not again. What? What did he say? She stared at him, stared into his frightened eyes, stared into his red face, swollen in horror and panic, trying to see into his mind, trying to make sense of what he said. Where is Donnie? Where is Donnie? He paced the small bedroom frantically, his limp more pronounced, his face so scarlet Jenny thought he might explode, repeating his question again and again, no longer able to shout, his voice a dry whisper. "Donnie, where are you?" "Here I am," Donnie said brightly, crawling out from under his bed. He climbed to his feet and straightened his pajamas. "Gotcha," he told Jenny, and started to laugh, pounding his little fists gleefully on top of his rumpled bedspread. Jenny and Mr. Hagan were so startled, so overwhelmed by the sight of Donnie, in perfect shape, unharmed, laughing, enjoying his ghastly joke. They stood staring at him open-mouthed, almost afraid to move, afraid that if they made a sound or came closer, he'd disappear again. And then Mr. Hagan let out a roar, a wild animal's roar, a roar of unleashed emotion. He lunged at Donnie, picked him up by the waist, and pulled him close to his chest. "You're okay. You're okay. You're okay," he cried again and again, hugging the surprised boy tightly to his chest. "I was playing hide-and-seek," Donnie offered, suddenly seeing the need to explain. "Jenny wouldn't play, so I played by myself." "What on earth is going on up here? What's all this shouting about?" Mrs. Hagan burst into the room, her coat swirling behind her. She stared at her red-faced husband, squeezing Donnie so tightly, still repeating, "You're okay, you're okay," into the boy's ear. "Why are you doing that to Donnie, Mike? You're squeezing him too hard." "We had a little scare," Jenny told her, finally finding her voice again, the flashing lights beginning to fade, her pulse beginning to return to normal. "A scare? What kind of a scare?" she asked Jenny, walking across the room and pulling Donnie away from Mr. Hagan. "I was playing hide-and-seek," Donnie reported with more than a little pride. "I fooled them. I fooled them both." "Get back in bed, Donnie," Mrs. Hagan said sternly. "It's way past your bedtime." She turned angrily to her husband. "What are you doing here? Why did you leave the party? I thought you were downstairs shooting pool with Jack and Ernie. I didn't even know you had left." "I just ran out for a minute. I had a hunch something was wrong with Donnie. I had to run home to find out. Then—" "Look at you," Mrs. Hagan said, her anger softening as she realized how overwrought her husband was. "You're a wreck. You've got to stop this needless worrying, Mike. I mean it. You had no business running home like this. I'm very worried about you. Very worried." Mr. Hagan looked past her to Jenny. "Please, let's not have a fight in front of—" I'll go downstairs," Jenny said uncertainly. "Now that we know Donnie is okay, No, let's get your coat while we're upstairs," Mr. Hagan said. "I'll drive you home." "No, you won't," Mrs. Hagan said, taking his arm. "I'm going to give you some pills to calm you down, Mike. I want you to stay home and try to get yourself together. I'll drive Jenny home." "I'm together. Really," he insisted. "Can I go too?" Donnie interrupted. "No, of course not," Mrs. Hagan said sternly. "You'd better be asleep in 5 minutes, Donnie, or you're going to be in a lot of trouble." She shooed Jenny and Mr. Hagan from the room. "Go on, out of here." Mr. Hagan retrieved Jenny's coat from his bedroom closet. Then, over his wife's objections, he grabbed the car keys and ushered Jenny out the door. They rode in silence the entire way. Normally, Jenny would have found that very uncomfortable. Tonight, she was grateful. When he pulled up her driveway, he turned to her with a guilty half-smile. "I really should apologize," he said. "No, it isn't necessary." "I really should," he said. But then he stopped. His eyes were wet. Was he crying? "I really should," he repeated. His voice sounded choked and small. "Donnie put us both through a real scare," Jenny said, and slid out of the car. She leaned back into the car, expecting Mr. Hagan to say something else. But he didn't, so she closed the door and hurried inside. "You're home early," her mother said. She was in her bathrobe, bare feet up on the couch, reading one of her mystery novels. "I know, the Hagans came home early," Jenny said. "Just as well." She yawned. "I'm really tired. Good night." No point in worrying her mother with all that was going on. "Night," her mother replied, not looking up from the book. Jenny climbed the narrow stairs to her room. Wish I could have a quiet Saturday night, she thought. Sitting home, reading a good book sounded pretty good. She tossed her jacket onto her desk chair. Just a few more weeks. I'm going to have to work a few more weeks. Then I'll have more than enough money for Christmas. I'll tell the Hagans I have to quit, that it's interfering with my schoolwork. Maybe I'll babysit occasionally for Donnie, but no more of this twice-a-week grind. No more frightening neighbors, no more frightening notes or creepy phone calls. Just as she thought this, the phone on her desk rang. She jumped and let out a startled cry. Who would be calling this late on a Saturday night? Laura? No, Laura would be out on a date with whoever had replaced Bob Tanner. A second ring. Was the creep following her? Did he have her home phone number? A third ring. Jenny, aren't you going to answer that? Her mother called from downstairs. She picked up the receiver. Hello? Hi. Chuck? Yeah. For a second, she was relieved, but her suspicions about Chuck quickly brought back her feeling of dread. Oh, hi. I'm surprised. I wanted to talk to you. Oh? Jenny, you've been avoiding me. No, Yes, you have. Come on. You walked away from me twice in the hall at school yesterday, and once I saw you deliberately go the other way when you saw me coming. I've just been busy, Chuck, and really... Is it about Thursday night? Did I get you into trouble? Did Hagen see my car? I'm really sorry, Jenny. No, he saw the car, but he didn't know anything. Then what's the problem? I kind of got the idea that you liked me, and I like you, a lot. You know this is hard for me to do, call like this. So I wish you'd be honest with me. It's about that call I made, isn't it? When I scared you, I told you how sorry I was. I'll apologize 1,000 times if you want. He sounded so sweet and so sincere. He wasn't joking or trying to be funny. He really cared about her, Jenny thought. Once again, she began to feel guilty for suspecting him. I haven't been avoiding you. I've just had a lot on my mind. I got a scary note, Chuck. I found it in my bag. Someone had to be pretty close to me to put it there. And you thought it was me? He sounded really hurt. I didn't know what to think. I still don't. I'm very mixed up. Why don't I come over and we'll talk? No, it's too late. I'm exhausted. Donnie played a mean joke tonight and had us all in a panic. How about Thursday night? He asked eagerly. Too eagerly? We could study together. Please, I'll leave really early. Well, she didn't know what to say. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to be with him. But she just couldn't get rid of her suspicions. Okay, I'll call Laura. Maybe she'd like to come too. We can all study together. Safety in numbers, she thought. Well, okay, I guess. He sounded very disappointed. He laughed to cover it up. You really think we need a chaperone? She forced a laugh, too. Laura's my best friend. I like to spend time with her, too, you know. Okay, good. Well, I'd better get off. Good night, Jenny. Night, Chuck. Thursday night will be special, he said. Then he hung up. What did he mean by that? Did his voice sound really strange when he said that? Or was Jenny just imagining it? Chapter 17. Wipe that fiendish look off your face, this instant, Jenny scolded. Donnie moved his hand down over his face as if using it to wipe off his expression. In its place was a dopey, twisted grin. Wipe that expression off too, Jenny said, unable to keep a straight face. No hide-and-seek tonight. No more tricks on your babysitter. Understand? Maybe, he said slyly, climbing into bed. She ran her hand through his soft hair and pulled up his covers. Now, go right to sleep. Is that boy coming over? He asked, yawning. That's none of your business, Jenny said lightly. She felt a sudden pang of guilt. Had Donnie told his parents about Chuck's visit? I don't care, she thought as she descended the stairs. I don't want to be alone here. I'm glad Chuck and Laura are coming. A few minutes later, she heard a knock on the door. She started to pull it open, thought better of it, and cautiously called out, Who's there? The Three Stooges, Chuck replied through the door. 3? She gratefully pulled open the door to find Chuck, Laura, and Eugene. Hi, Eugene, she cried, unable to hide her surprise. How's it going? He said, following the others into the entranceway. Wow, some house. Looks more like a museum than a house, Laura said, pulling off her coat and tossing it onto the stairs. Jenny gave Laura a look as if to say, What's Eugene doing here? Laura just shrugged. Why not? She mouthed. Is this place a horror show or what? Chuck laughed, picking up a strange sculpture of an unrecognizable animal and examining it. It's so creepy looking. Can't you just picture vampires sleeping in coffins in the basement? Jenny gave Chuck a dirty look. Stop that. Is that how you cheer me up? Oops, sorry. He pretended to stab himself in the chest and then fall backwards onto the sofa in front of the fireplace. Hey, didn't anyone bring any books? I thought we were going to study, Jenny said. I knew we forgot something, Eugene said, slapping his forehead. Eugene and I have to talk, Laura said, pulling Eugene's arm. Is that the den over there? Talk, Jenny said. So, Laura planned to use this opportunity to make out with Eugene? Yeah, that's the den. Great seeing you, Laura, she said sarcastically. Laura just giggled. You guys all have to leave in a couple of hours, Jenny told them. If Mr. Hagen comes home early and finds you here, I'll be out of here. For good. Chuck took Jenny's hand. Don't worry. I'll make sure we all get out in time. He pulled her over to the couch. Laura and Eugene disappeared into the den and closed the door. Wonder what they're talking about, Chuck joked, looking toward the den. Then he suddenly turned serious. Why do you want me to bring them? I didn't know about Eugene. I just thought Laura was coming. I already told you. I thought it would be more fun to study. I had a feeling maybe you didn't want to be alone with me. Jenny realized that she had underestimated how smart Chuck was, and how sensitive. No, I really want you to trust me, Jenny. He was still holding her hand. He squeezed it gently. I'd really like to trust you, Chuck, she thought. I'd really like to trust you more than anything, but I don't know if I can. He kissed her, softly at first, then harder, pulling her closer to him. He couldn't be the one who's threatening me, she thought, kissing him back, trying to lose herself in the kiss. Try not to think about anything but him. It has to be Willer's. It has to be. But what about the note in her bag? Willers couldn't have put it there. Chuck wrapped her in his arms and kissed her again, but she couldn't stop thinking. She couldn't stop doubting him, wondering about him, wondering. Hey, Chuck, you left your headlights on. Eugene's head popped out from the den door. What? I can see them from the den window. Your headlights, they're on. Thanks, Eugene. Chuck disentangled himself from Jenny and climbed to his feet. Sorry, I'll be right back. He headed quickly to the front door. Save my place. Why did I let them come? Why did I do this? Jenny thought, watching Chuck disappear out the front door. Do I want to lose my job? Do I want Mr. Hagen to fire me so I don't have to be scared anymore? Then she heard a sound. A footstep? A door opening? It came from the direction of the kitchen. Had Mr. Hagen come home early again? Or was it a different visitor? Company's coming. Was this the night? Was the kitchen door locked? She hadn't checked. Was someone in the house? She listened. Another sound. Without realizing it, she was on her feet. Then she was in the back hallway. She walked quickly past the laundry room, past a small pantry, then slowed as she approached the kitchen. Who is it? She called. Silence. Hello? Anyone there? Chuck, please hurry back. What's taking you so long? The kitchen was silent, except for the loud hum of the refrigerator and the steady plink, plink, plink of water dripping from the kitchen faucet. Was someone hiding in that silence? Was someone waiting in that silence? She crept a little closer, keeping near to the wall in the narrow hallway. She tried to convince herself that she was being silly, that she was acting like a frightened child. But she realized that her fear was justified. The phone calls had been real. The threats had been real. Willers prowling about in the garage, following her from the bus, had been real. She had real reasons to be afraid, real reasons to be cautious, to hesitate there in the hallway. This wasn't her imagination acting up again. A sudden flash of memory. She was a little girl again, 7 or 8. Her parents had just divorced. She was adjusting to the sudden emptiness, the strange feeling of life with one parent, where a short while before there had been 2. She was standing in the hallway outside the kitchen door, in the old house before she and her mother moved to the house they had now. The memory was so clear, so bright, still so fresh in her mind. A drop of blood. She spotted a bright red drop of blood in the hallway floor just outside the kitchen. Her mother was in the kitchen. She listened. She heard a chopping sound, a horrible sound, a sound she didn't recognize. She stared at the drop of blood, glowing so red on the dark linoleum. She listened to the chop, chop, chop coming from the kitchen, so insistent, so steady, so mechanical. She could still remember the terror from those long years ago. What was making that chopping sound? Why was there blood on the hallway floor? Where was her mother? What had happened to her mother? Propelled by her fear, she had burst into the kitchen, prepared to scream, to cry out her terror. Her mother was standing at the sink, chopping carrots with a large knife. Chop, chop, chop. She had a Band-Aid on her thumb. "Ma, the blood!" Jenny had screamed. She had to scream. She had to let it out. Even though her eyes told her everything was okay, she still had all that terror to let out. "I cut my thumb," her mother said, holding the thumb up for a second for Jenny to see. then returning to the knife and the pile of carrots. Chop, chop, chop. Clink, clink, clink. Water dripped into the Higgins kitchen sink. The memory faded slowly. Then, propelled by the same fear she had felt as a little girl, Jenny burst into the kitchen. No one there, except for the cat. The cat had knocked over the sugar canister on the counter and was busily lapping herself into a sugar coma. That explained the noise. Jenny ran to the kitchen door. It was locked. She leaned against the counter to catch her breath. "Got me again, kitty," she told the cat. "You bad cat." The cat ignored her and kept lapping up the sugar. Feeling relieved, Jenny walked back to the living room. Chuck was waiting for her on the sofa. "Where'd you go?" "Oh, I had to check on something in the kitchen," she told him. "Come here and warm me up. It's freezing out there." He patted the sofa cushion beside him. She was glad he was there. Her doubts about him were melting away. He genuinely liked her. He really cared about her, she thought. She had been foolish for suspecting him. She dropped down beside him. He pulled her close. She felt so safe now, so warm, so good. The time seemed to fly by. She lost all track of time. She lost all track of everything. She was still locked in Chuck's arms, still kissing him, when she looked up and saw Mr. Hagan glaring down at them from behind the sofa.